Good evening and welcome to this program. This is the Limelight and my name is Sima Apollo. Now, following the death of the former Speaker of Parliament, the Right Honorable Jacob Oulanyah, the ruling National Resistance Movement this week endorsed his son, Andrew Ojok, to contest and replace him as the new Member of Parliament representing Omoro County in the 11th Parliament. Now, this is not a new phenomenon, considering the fact that we have seen and witnessed incidents where family members and children of the deceased legislators replace them in Parliament. And what maybe has been the argument is that these members of Parliament go through contestation and an electoral process that brings them to Parliament. And again, another argument is that they also possess the necessary minimum qualifications to become members of Parliament. But then we need to ask ourselves whether it is good for a growing democracy to have people and actually family members of the deceased representing them in the same positions of leadership. And in that context, we will need to link up with the Honorable Robert Centenary, and he is a former legislator. Robert, thank you for joining us this evening, and we straight away need to pick your opinion.
You're welcome.
Whereas these members go through a system and processes of election, do you think this is a good idea? Is it a good practice, Honorable Centenary?
First of all, good evening, viewers. I appreciate that every citizen in his individual capacity who merits and qualifies to vie for an elective position is free to exercise his civic right and compete. But since we're a growing democracy, I think in the spirit of participatory leadership, it may not be a good idea on one hand, because that practice of bringing relatives is more of a monarchical kind of practice. But in an open democracy like we have in Uganda, I know that once somebody is deceased, people want to ride on the sentiments, the emotional appeal. People want to make an emotional appeal to the electorate, and it is one of the dividends that they want to utilize. All political parties. And so it is not really new that that is going to happen. But for this particular one, if you are to ask me my personal opinion about the late Jacob Oulanyah's son vying for the constituency, at a personal level, as a friend, I would say, well, since Jacob was the lifeline and the sole provider, the breadwinner of the family, it would be okay for the son to come, because then he is the heir and he needs to take up the mantle and maybe look up after the siblings. In the African setting, it is normal that somebody will take over from their father. But in a modern democracy like Uganda, where we are in a multi-party dispensation and every political party has to, field a candidate, it may not seem to be morally upright in an African cultural setting, but we need to field a candidate. NRM already has over 400 representatives in Parliament. We need to increase the voice of the opposition, because we are just still a minority, and we need to be more so that we are able to balance the political equation of this country and be able to counteract the NRM monopoly.
But, Honorable Robert, now that you say it is not a new, it's not new, and it has been happening. How, to what level has the sympathy vote played out in such an election where we have a family member or a relative competing to replace the deceased legislator?
On many occasions, if the deceased legislator or leader has been competitive and relevant to the electorate, that personal appeal, the emotions have always worked out in favor of their relative. I've seen it in Kamuli, where our former colleague, the late Hajat Wetongola's daughter, made a successful bid. There is this lady from Usuk, Elongat. I have seen the late Francis Ayume's son make it to parliament, but that also is premised on the legacy that the deceased a leader that has not really lived to the expectations of the electorate. And then
all right, looks like we lost Honorable Centenary, but we will be linking up with him again.
Nobody will like to carry
well,
on.
You are right back, Honorable.
So there is nobody who will want to carry on the mediocre leadership. So if you really want your relative to take over from you, then you're better off building a legacy while you still live on. And then your relatives can ride on that, because constitutionally, if they qualify, they merit to come and replace you. Like I have said, the political parties will also want to have that dividend, a platform that is already built for them, and they build on that.
Have made it through such in this practice, people who have actually legislators who have succeeded their parents and have made it to parliament. Many of them do only manage the first term in parliament, and the next time, the next term, the voters maybe think otherwise. Does that have a relationship to this practice in any way or another?
Of course, we can never be the same. Even if you're my father, we think differently, we approach issues differently. But because there are those emotions flaring at the time of the passing on of a person, and the election has to take place within a maximum of 6 month period, people still have those sentiments, that emotional attachment to the deceased leader. So it will always influence, and you know, an election is an activity mainly based on sentiment. Sometimes I know that these voters will make a choice and regret immediately after. But then it is up to you, the person that they have chosen, to ensure that you live up to the expectation of the electorate and you carry on the mantle, you keep the fire burning. But if you think you're going to raid on the sentiments will die off within a year. People will have forgotten, and they want you to be there on your own merit. So it's one way to take up the position of leadership, but it's also another thing to deliver up to the expectation of that position that you're holding. So I can say leadership is not hereditary, is not like genetic, because we've seen very powerful leaders. I'll give you an example of Nelson Mandela. None of his children has been able even to make it to parliament. They are doing other things. One is a DJ. But yes, as soon as somebody passes on, it is natural that people will think, okay, how do we reward this person? And besides, he had just been in parliament for only 1 year. There are 4 more years remaining. Maybe let's give to his son to stabilize. It's mainly the economic aspect that people seek to fulfill.
Well, good that, Honorable Robert, you talk about the economic benefit that is embedded in this practice. And from your perspective, do you think this this practice should be carried on. Looks like now it has been adopted. Every time a legislator or a leader dies in office, then the next day you will hear their relatives and their friends talking about, looking for that person in the family, close to the deceased family, who can take up the mantle. Do you think it is a good trajectory this young democracy is taking?
You see, this is something that is embodied in our cultural practices. Traditionally, if I passed on, then they will look for my son to take over from me. And that is what has been the practice from our forefathers. So we are not doing anything new from the forefathers. I may think it should be opened up for people, because leadership is supposed to be on meritocracy. We should emphasize more of meritocracy than the sentiments and illusions that we normally have. Those emotional attachments we normally have, like I said, leadership is not hereditary. I may be a very good legislator, I may be a very good leader, but that does not automatically translate onto my siblings. I have seen the late Nebanda, she passed on, the sister took over. She served one term and lost on the next one, but now she's back to parliament. So the political dynamics, especially in the African settings, is a little bit fluid. And like I said, it's always based on sentiments.
Work better. What do you propose? What do you think should be done to sanitize the democracy, especially, like we said, this is a young democracy?
I propose that it should be opened up. If people think that my son qualifies, then let him qualify on his own merit, not because I was a good leader or I was a leader and therefore they need to reward my family. So if any of my relatives qualifies and is competitive enough, let him also compete with others. Because in this case of Omoro, I saw the chairman of the NRM imposing a candidate and saying nobody should compete for this seat. It should be left to the son of the late Olanya Jacob, which is okay in a traditional African setup. But I think if they opened it up, probably you never know. The natural justice could also favor him. So if we really want to grow our democracy, we should allow it to function in its fullest sense. And learn to separate our personal sentiments from the institutional sentiments. Because an institution should be able to function fully without our emotional sentiments. And that's the only way we can achieve a full democracy.
Are you proposing a legislation embedded in our constitution, or you're proposing laws laid out either in constitutions of political parties? What are you proposing to ensure that if they are to repress the deceased parents or relatives, they should compete fairly? And again, we look at how we can bring those legislators who actually are legislators in that sense.
Well, there is no way you can change that legislation because the qualifications for somebody to vie for a position are very clear. Senior 6 is the minimum, and 18 years for a member of parliament and a president. So that is the minimum qualification. But on many occasions, I know that political parties have built consensus over certain candidates. What I am not comfortable with is for a political party to lock out other people who want to vie for the same seat because they want to probably reward a member or a leader that has passed on. If they can build consensus, it's okay, so that the other candidates agree that, okay, in the spirit of colleaguism, let us not compete. But in an event where people have showed up, I think they should be also allowed to exercise their civic right Because if we promote the aspect of sole candidature because of the sentiments, the replacement may not necessarily be a suitable one.
End up with the sentiments again against those who are actually fronting candidates to compete with a son or a daughter of the deceased politician, because we've heard of actually some voices castigating the National Unity Platform or the FDC and other parties who are actually intending to compete in that by-election. Is it what you're saying that those voices should not be suppressed? We should allow free competition, even if the party itself, like the National Unity Movement, has endorsed this candidate. Those voices should be allowed and candidates should be fronted whichever way, leave out those emotions of friendship and all that.
Politically, the space is opened. FDC, NUP, they have a right to field candidates. I can also affirm to you that the FDC has a candidate who has been handed over a flag. But in the end, the decision is not up to the different political organizations to choose the leader. It is, again, it goes back to the electorate, the people down on the ground. If they think that the son to the deceased is the most competent to take up that position, then they will go and cast a vote for him. So I don't see a reason why people should lock out other political actors from participating. In any case, I would even say NRM, because it already has a big voice in parliament, should even let this position go to other political actors so that we are able to balance the political equation. And I know my colleague, deceased Jacob Olanya, having served in parliament for a long time, if it is about the economic benefits as a speaker, you know the benefits. He has accumulated enough gratuity, enough pension that can, and even government has a goodwill. You saw the other time when the president was directing that they should complete his structure. So I don't think that OJ's children are that desperate economically, but NRM also has a right to field its candidate because they want to maintain that political power and that hand in Omoro. But equally, FDC wants to have that political hand in Omoro. NUP wants to have that political hand in Omoro. So it's not a family affair, but it is a national affair. And I do not think there is anywhere in the laws of Uganda where a political party is deterred from fielding a candidate because of the emotional flares that are still fresh in the people's minds. I also think that, yes, every political organization has a right to participate in an electoral process. Otherwise, electoral commission wouldn't be opening it up for being competed for. They would have just ring-fenced it and said, okay, this one we nominate and we are appointing so-and-so to come and represent Omoro. The fact that it was opened up for competition, then so let the competition take place. At the end of it all, it is the citizens of Omoro who will decide who is the most suitable and most competitive to represent them in parliament after the demise of our beloved brother, Jacob.
Well, Honorable Centenary, as a senior legislator and an astute politician, tell us what you think what you envisage this by-election will look like, especially now after the FDC has, of course, demonstrated that they are going to field a candidate in that by-election. The NUP has already, of course, showed us another candidate to carry their flag. The NRM, of course, they have endorsed the son to Jacob Olanya. What do you envisage, as a matter of fact, this by-election will look like?
Just like any other by-elections, it's more of a military operation. The state normally pumps in a lot of money, they bring security operatives. I don't think it's going to be business as usual, and especially that the ruling party fears to be embarrassed, like you saw in Kayunga. So I will not say it was going to be a smooth trend, and I would appeal to government to let the will of the people of Omoro carry the day at the end of it all, because the legislator that is coming to parliament is coming to represent the people of Omoro. He's not coming to represent the NRM or government, but the will of the people of Omoro. If it is Jacob's son, it is okay. I have no problem for as long as the electorate has decided so. If it is our candidate as the FDC or the NUP candidate that carries the day, as long as the principles and values of democracy have been allowed to take place, that is what I desire to see in Omoro. But of course the practice has been militarization, commercialization. You'll see a lot of money, exchanging hands, voter bribery, intimidation, and all that kind of thing. And like you always seen, the president is the father of the nation. Even though he's the chairman of the NRM, I think he has a very competent vice chairman who can go and directly participate. You see, when you're a father and you start siding with a certain section of your family, then it loses meaning. Your parenthood loses meaning. I would advise the president sometimes to desist from such things and allow the secretary general of the party and the vice chairperson to go to the field, because at his age and stature, he's the fountain of honor. It is so ashaming for people to start pelting stones at him like it happened in Arua, So sometimes he should save himself from that kind of humiliations and let the will of the people be. That is my advice anyway. It's a personal opinion. It's up to him. If he wants to go to Omoro, he can go and become a campaign manager, but I wouldn't advise him to do so.
Thank you so much for your time, Honorable Robert Centenary, the former legislator representing Kasese municipality, and he is a senior legislator there looking at the succession, the politics of succession in Parliament this evening. My name is Simapolo. This stage is set for the by-election in Omoro County come the 25th of May this year, and we wait to see how it will pan out and who will replace the former Speaker Jacob Oulanyah. My name is Simapolo. I thank you so much for staying with us and hope to see you again next week.